Now, mention the words Saba Capital Management to anyone in a senior position in the world of UK investment trusts, and they're likely to go a peculiar shade of red or even green. But as the hedge fund struggles to take over closed-end investment strategies in the UK, I'm wondering, are investment trusts out of the woods just yet? Here to answer that question is Morningstar's Dan Haydon from the manager research team. Dan, thanks so much for being here. Just bring everyone up to speed. What's Saba Capital Management been up to?
So Saba is an activist hedge fund. It's taken a particular interest in the UK's investment trust sector. One should contextualise this. It's not just the UK, but the most recent and high-profile attacks have really focused on the UK sector. They've made a number of proposals which were quite aggressive for 7 investment trusts, essentially proposing to dispose of the board and change the manager. 6 of these 7 votes have now concluded. None came out in favour of Saba. One might think, why is that? Well, the proposals were a bit thin on detail, to be honest. The proposed board structure didn't really meet expectations in terms of governance, with just 2 proposed directors, both related parties. And then on the investment strategy side of things, there was essentially no detail whatsoever. So these have failed. There are a number of other active investments that they have, including via total return swaps. We'll see what happens on that front. But happy to expand if you have any questions.
Sure. So one thing I'm wondering about is, whether this changes the landscape for investment trusts permanently, right? So is this going to make a permanent change to the way that investment trusts operate, or perhaps a little bit of paranoia at the board level?
I mean, it's a good question. I think really it's injected a bit of oomph into the governance process. Shareholder democracy is well and alive. The sector isn't out of the woods yet. Most recently, it was disclosed around their position in Smithson. So that's the Fundsmith small cap closed-ended fund. There are a number of others as well behind the scenes that you can see via these total return swaps. Is this a secular change? I'd say no. Governance is well and truly happening, and it's a good thing. One needs to remember that there have been large discounts to net asset values across the sector. Yeah. Some strategies have underperformed. Boards are taking action. Now, one might say they've been forced to take more action now from Saba, but Metage Capital has been interested in the HVPE investment trust. We've also seen engagements from Elliott with Scottish Mortgage. This isn't a new story, essentially. But yeah, the boards are clearly taking action. We've seen record buybacks last year, about twice that of 2023. We've seen changes to fee schedules. This is all good for the investor. Yeah, it's not purely from Saba, but sure, I wouldn't expect any boards not to be having a discussion when it comes to persistent discounts and potential underperformance long term. So it's arguably a positive.
It's all to play for. Just finally, you wrote last year for us about investment trust consolidation and the big Alliance Trust Witan merger. Are you expecting more consolidation?
Short answer, yes. We've seen this play out much faster, actually, in some senses. Last year, I believe there were 10 mergers in the investment trust landscape. That's a record. Yeah, one of the other discussions at the board level is, are we at the right size and scale? Are people really able to access the strategy? What's the liquidity like? Scale helps with that. I'm aware of at least one ongoing merger discussion at the moment in the investment trust sector. We're going to see more of this. What might be more interesting is whether we might see some IPOs, which will be good and interesting. But given that LTAFs, so the private structures have been the main focus.
Long-term asset funds?
Well, yes, yeah, long-term asset funds. So a natural home for investment trust captive capital is in these long-term private opportunities. What we've seen is LTAFs taking centre stage. It will be interesting to see how this plays out long term, and I wouldn't rule out some new launches perhaps on that front too.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dan. For more on investment trusts and Saba capital management, check out any of Dan's analytical output on morningstar.co.uk. But don't forget to catch up too with Sunva Kolosiak's reporting on those shareholder votes. The next and final one is on the 14th of February. Happy Valentine's Day. Until next time, my thanks to Dan. I've been Ollie Smith for Morningstar.